Hi, well, it's 2 p.m. So I would start now. I'll just give you a little bit of technical information before we start the webinar. So please note that all the participant microphones have been muted until the discussion at the end of the webinar. But if you'd like to ask a question at any time to any of the panelists, then you can write it in the Q&A box, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. During the discussion, you'll also be able to raise your hand and ask a question live as well. You can use the chat box instead if you have any technical issues, and we'll be happy to try to resolve those for you. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording, along with all of the accompanying slides, will be made available on the GBEP website and also will be circulated to all people who registered after the webinar. So everything will be made available to you. So without further ado, I'd like to pass the floor over to Ms. Emily Marthala, the current GBEP co-chair from the US Department of Agriculture, to give the welcome remarks to the webinar. Over to you, Emily. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Connie, and big thank you to everyone for joining us today. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever it is, or evening, wherever you may be. As everyone no doubt knows, at this moment, global leaders are meeting in Glasgow for COP26 to discuss actions and mitigation measures that countries can take to reverse the impacts of climate change. One such way is through bioenergy. Bioenergy plays an important role and is recognized as an integral component in a low carbon, net zero global energy system. Globally, the transportation sector produces 14% of total anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. It's a sector where decarbonization is often hampered by entrenched fossil fuel interests and faces significant infrastructure hurdles to change. But it's also a sector that will require biofuels to serve, at the very least, as an intermediary option for reducing emissions from the existing vehicle fleet. A five-fold increase in the production capacity of biofuels is needed by 2050 to meet the international climate targets. More specifically, the supply of advanced biofuels will require 62 times its current 2020 level. Competing demands for biomass are also projected to increase over this time period, in particular as the use of sustainable aviation fuels takes off. Global trade will continue to be important. Innovation feedstocks and technologies will need to be researched, developed, and commercially deployed. Further, implementation of strong enabling biofuels policies will be necessary. All of this will require a coordinated effort from all sectors to develop and promote sustainable solutions that work for people in the globe. The United States remains committed to the expansion and use of biofuels, and we are excited about serving as GBEP co-chair. Through GBEP, public, private, and civil society stakeholders are brought together in a joint commitment to promote sustainable bioenergy development. This important bioenergy platform brings together stakeholders to share experiences, discuss opportunities, and build partnerships. This webinar, I'm excited about myself. It's going to be a great opportunity to hear from some of the leading companies in the field of advanced biofuels, hear what they think is needed to create a sustainable aviation or a sustainable future for the sector. I've been saying sustainable aviation fuels a lot lately, sorry. And it will really help fully contribute to a low carbon and net zero transportation target. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And Connie, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Emily. So I'm just going to, before we go on to the discussion, I'm just going to give a very brief overview of GBEP, the Global Bioenergy Partnership, and what we do in terms of advanced liquid biofuels. My name is Constance Miller, and I'm the lead technical advisor for the Global Bioenergy Partnership, or GBEP. So for those of you who do not know, GBEP is an international initiative established to implement the commitments taken by the G8 in 2005. USA and Brazil are currently the co-chairs of the GBEP, and FAO is a founding partner and hosts the Secretariat in its headquarters in Rome. The partnership is currently made up of over 80 governments and international organizations, 38 partners, observers. One of the focuses of the partnership is on capacity building, and GBEP has a specific activity group led by the USA on advanced liquid biofuels. This activity group has the objective to facilitate exchange of knowledge, experiences, and technologies, and to undertake capacity building related to the development of advanced biofuels and their applications, including their evaluation according to the GBEP sustainability indicators for bioenergy. And if you're interested on those indicators, I don't have time to go through them now, but you're welcome to find out some more information on our website. And under the activity group 8 on advanced liquid biofuels, the first section of experiences in advanced liquid fuels, and this collection takes a deep dive into a selection of different experiences in advanced biofuels to detail their variety, not only in terms of technology and development phase, but also in their benefits, drivers, and barriers. The experiences in the collection range from pilot to commercial scale facilities, and they cover 4 continents. Each experience details the enabling factors, main drivers, benefits, and challenges, as well as information on technology transfer, potential for scale up and replicability, and also the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The document is to be published later this month, and it's going to be a living document and will be updated periodically. So if you have an experience that you would like to include, feel free to email us for some more information on that. So now that I've provided a little bit of context for the webinar and for the discussion that we'll be having today, I'm going to pass over to the floor to our moderator for today's roundtable discussion, Gerard Ostheimer, the co-manager of the Clean Energy Ministerial Biofuture campaign. So over to you, Jerry.
Thank you very much, Connie. Very good to see you again. Very good to see all of you again. And I see among the participants a number of people who I wish I had been able to speak to more frequently. And certainly we haven't seen each other anywhere near enough in the last few years. I would like to thank you for that scene setter from Emily and Connie. And I would just like to get to the panel as quickly as possible. We are joined by 4 leading companies, each of which with each of which brings a very interesting types of complementary bio-based technologies. So we have Freya Burton from Lanzatech, Marco Janhunen from UPM Biofuels, Pierluigi Picciotti from Versalis, and Johannes Leken from Neste. I'm just going to do very quick introductions of all 4, and then we can get started with Freya. So Freya, I think, wears many hats simultaneously. She's listed officially as the Chief Sustainability Officer, and yet she also leads on government relations, external relations, and I also believe human relations within the company. So Freya, I think, is actually quite busy. Marco is the Director for Public Affairs, and Marco has been a stalwart contributor to at the minimum, the European, but also to the global discussion around biofuels, bioproducts, and bio-based chemicals for a long time. Pierluigi, likewise, has been quite active bringing products to market, and currently he leads on licensing green chemistry from Versalis, and some of you might know him from his time working internationally with Beta Renewables. And Johannes, who I haven't met before, but I'm happy to meet so now, he currently has arguably the least enviable job of being the head of public affairs for Europe and Neste. And Europe is arguably one of the more challenging policy environments for biofuels these days. And so without further delay, I invite Freya to get us started, followed by Marco, Pierluigi, and Johannes. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jerry, and thank you very much for having Lanzatech along today. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Jerry, I can see you. If you can give me a thumbs up, perfect, thank you. Always a bit disconcerting speaking just to a screen. So I'm just going to get straight in there and talk about, really what Lanzatech does, and that sort of will sort of be a thread through what I'll be talking about in the discussion today. But essentially, we are a company that takes waste carbon and we convert that into fuels and other chemicals. But in terms of the types of waste that we use, we can take solid waste, superheat it through a process of gasification, turn that into a synthesis gas, and feed it into our system. We can also take industrial emissions, and we can take CO2 when combined with clean green hydrogen, or converting CO2 into carbon monoxide. And all of these waste gases we can feed into a reactor, classic fermentation that we know as using sugars and yeast to make ethanol, but we use the bacteria to take this waste carbon gas stream, use the bacteria, and it makes ethanol, very much in the same way, a process called gas fermentation. If we go to the next slide. And really what we do, it obviously sounds a bit, if you haven't heard about what we do, it sounds a bit like science fiction, but this is real. We've been scaling this technology over the last sort of 15 years. We have 2 operating plants in China, one using steel mill emissions, one using ferroalloy emissions. We have pre-demonstration and pilot plants around the world. We have a facility that will be operating in Belgium, in Ghent, with ArcelorMittal in 2022. And that project was also done in conjunction with Horizon 2020 and the European Commission. But as you can see from this map, we have partners across the supply chain in terms of feedstocks. So it's very flexible. We're taking solid waste, industrial emissions, agricultural waste, so harking back to more traditional sort of biofuel feedstocks. And also we're doing this in conjunction with partnerships. I mentioned the European Commission, but also with the US government as well. We've had a lot of fantastic partnerships, particularly in the realm of sustainable aviation fuels. If we go to the next slide, hopefully. So sustainable aviation fuels are important. And if you sort of look back to that previous one, or you think about how many projects we had, that's just Lanzatech. But if you think about utilizing all of those feedstocks around the world using other non-Lanzatech technologies, the potential is immense. It translates to something like 1 trillion liters of ethanol each year. And so you might think, well, why do we need that? We're in a transition, electric vehicles are coming to the fore. But if we think about the need of where we have to get to for sustainable aviation, we need sustainable, plentiful feedstocks. And so that's what our focus has really been on, is in converting that ethanol into a sustainable aviation fuel. We've developed a process, which is now the Lanzajet alcohol to jet process, which can convert ethanol into a synthetic paraffinic kerosene and also a renewable diesel. You may have seen news stories over the last couple of years where we've done sort of commercial flights with Virgin Atlantic and now Nippon Airways. And last year spun off our jet fuel company, Lanzajet, who spins off a jet fuel company in the middle of a pandemic when no one's flying. Turns out we do. But we are really committed to producing those volumes of fuel very much needed for the aviation sector from this plentiful waste-based source of ethanol. So I'll stop there because I think that really sets the scene for where we're coming from in terms of feedstocks and fuels.
That's perfect, Freya. I'll just let you know that Olivier Dubois has been asking about sort of energy costs and price costs, and we'll get to those questions. Well, hopefully we'll get to those questions after our next speakers. And so our next speaker is Marco. So Marco, please.
Thank you very much, Jerry, and thanks to GBEP for the kind invitation and for putting together this seminar today. I'm representing UPM, which is one of the largest forest industry groups in the world. We do many different types of forest products, but today really focusing on innovations where you can replace fossil products with biomaterials, for example. Therefore, we're investing currently over €500 million in wood-based biochemical plant in Germany. Next slide, please. So the background really for me to speak here is based on our experience in the Lappeenranta biorefinery. We made a courageous move to invest in advanced biofuels in 2012, started operations 2015, and with this very successful commercial operation since 2015, we last year, actually early this year, announced that we're looking at new growth opportunities in the advanced biofuels business. So we're looking at 2 locations, one in the Netherlands, one in Finland, up to 500,000 tons of production and up to $1 billion investment cost, and obviously looking at a number of issues at the moment between the 2 locations, but also with regard to the feedstock issues. Next slide, please. And one of the really big issues, and something that I wanted to bring into this discussion as well, is the sustainable feedstock issue. While we know that there is still a lot of potential, and at the same time a lot of investments going on in different continents, what we try to do is really to maybe differentiate, maybe to find new types of feedstock opportunities. And since 5 years, we've been cultivating in Uruguay a winter crop. Doesn't exactly look, the picture doesn't exactly look like winter, but it's a winter time in that picture, where we've been doing over 50,000 hectares already cumulatively, close to 10,000 hectares per year of testing, developing, working with farmers, and creating a new concept of climate positive fuels. Next slide, please. This is really focusing on winter crops, so cover cropping, winter cropping, sequential cropping, has a lot of names. Whether it then has a name within regulation is the discussion, obviously, that we like to discuss. That's not so clear, and that's why we're quite eagerly looking at developments with regard to a number of EU processes where this can be decided. But we believe that if we want sustainable advanced biofuels to play a major role and further grow as they should and as they need to, we need to find a new kind of collaboration between the agriculture sector and the fuels sector. Again, looking here at using land as sustainably as you can, creating winter crops, cover crops, creating new ways of sequestering carbon into the soil, and finding actually a win-win for the farmer and the biofuel industry. So this has been very much in our focus, and I'm going to stop here so we have time for discussion. Jerry, over to you. You're muted.
Thank you, Marco. And fascinating story in Uruguay developing. That's great. Without any delay, I'm going to go straight to Pierluigi, and I'm very grateful to the first 2 speakers to keeping their remarks on time, allowing for your deeper insights later. Pierluigi.
Hi, Gerard. Thank you very much. I also will have condensate my presentation in just 3 slides, so we can go very, very quickly, and then I have plenty of time for the discussion. If you go to the next slide, just an introduction. I represent Versalis, who is the biggest chemical company in Italy, and is a traditional petrochemical company that since 2018 has developed has opened a new business unit called Biotech, who is focused to develop all opportunities that we can find in order to shift from the traditional petrochemistry based on fossil carbon to the green chemistry. As a licensing company, we have plenty portfolios of technology, and in the green area, in the green chemistry, we have one technology that is called Proesa for the production of cellulose sugars from feedstock. And this technology is the one that we have in place in our plant in Crescentino, who is in the north of Italy. If we go to the next slide. Okay, Proesa basically is a technology that is considered as a platform for a biorefinery. So at the moment, it is used to produce cellulosic ethanol for blending in fuel, and I will maybe talk later during the discussion about this, but actually offer the opportunity to utilize the ethanol for other purpose, or to produce the sugars and as intermediates towards other chemicals. That probably this will be in the middle or long term the direction and the extremely interesting story for the biorefineries. I have highlighted 3 key points that we operate a commercial scale plant with one of the very few in the world. We license the technology on a worldwide basis, so we do not have any limitation, and we see many potentials, particularly in emerging economies, for cellulosic ethanol. And we have recently signed a cooperation agreement with an engineering company from Italy, with UPM, in order to offer a full services, because one of the key aspects is that these projects are complex and require a wide range of capabilities. If we go to the next slide, that will be my last one. As we were talking about biofuel, advanced biofuel policies, just I want to throw on the table some point regarding what is the Italian situation or the Italian case. We have a national energy and climate plan with a target of 22 new renewable energy for 2030, and with specific indication regarding advanced biofuel. Particularly interesting is the fact that it will be also split with separate target between gasoline and diesel, that currently obviously are the 2 liquid fuels that are widely used. Italy, as I mentioned, has a huge potential of biomass from agricultural residual, and if Italy has a big potential, you can imagine countries in Africa or in Asia or in South America, what they can really achieve in this sense. So I look forward to the discussion later, and thanks a lot again for your attention.
That's great, Pierluigi, and very interesting for you to raise the opportunities for economically engaging with other parts of the world. Obviously, Marco in his talk talked about their engagement in Uruguay. You raised the potential for parts of Africa, and I think that is it's the mission statement really of the Global Bioenergy Partnership. And so maybe we will circle around to talk about how these technologies can either be sinks or attractants for feedstocks from around the world, or how these technologies can be deployed around the world. Okay, so thank you for that. Johannes, over to you, please, with the perspective from Neste, and thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be invited here to speak on behalf of Neste. It's my pleasure. Who is Neste? I hope that some of you are familiar with the company, but just to say, it's actually a 70-year-old company that nowadays feels like a startup. There is a lot going on in different areas. Yesterday, we were still a regional oil refining company. Today, we are the world's largest producer of renewable fuels from waste and residue raw material. This is here our so-called NextBTL technology. We have production facilities in Finland, the Netherlands, and Singapore. By 2023, we hope to grow our production to 4.5 million tons, and we have the next investment in Rotterdam already lining up, adding another 1.2 million tons of capacity later in the decade. Our fuels are already sold to customers in around 25 to 30 countries globally at the moment. in its neat form. So 100% renewable diesel fuel is being sold at more than 600 gas stations globally to end customers, and numbers are rising daily. It's a great fuel that burns very clean. It's a drop-in solution also for the aviation industry. And yeah, by 2030, we hope that we can reduce our customers' emissions by at least 20 million tons of CO2 annually. We're developing new solutions, new raw materials. This is new technologies. So other than our traditional NextBTL technology, as you can see here, with a specific focus on lignocellulosics, municipal solid waste, algae, and power to X. And if you go to the next slide, then it's just shown from our perspective what the challenge is. So here you see the global liquid oil demand that is projected based on the International Energy Agency figures. And if we go immediately to the next slide, then we see where we stand currently in managing to decarbonize the transport sector. And if we go immediately to the next slide, then you can see what we believe the potential is. So we see it's a team play that is needed, and we want to play that game. We want to support the decarbonization of transport, and we believe that biofuels have a big role to play, but it's not going to be the only solution either. We need all the solutions. So we also need a combination of instruments to achieve that, and shouldn't rely on specific technologies. So any high ambition, also now in light of the COP, is very much welcome and will support the uptake of renewable fuels. What we also believe is that we need to start immediately. There's no time to lose. There's now a talk about the betrayal. If you listen to younger generations looking at Glasgow, I cannot resent them for it. It's also great to see, on the other hand, so many companies coming up with net zero ambitions. But the question is, if the net, who will make that net work? And Marco already hinted to it. Biofuels, in our view, have the potential to eventually also be carbon positive, and these are the solutions that we need. So yeah, looking forward to the discussion. Stop it here, so we have enough time.
That's great, Johannes. Much appreciated. And I have to say, I really appreciated your grids showing the relative volumes and where we need to be. So I'm going to start with a general question that we can go quickly to all of you. Maybe two general questions. First general question is, international organizations are fairly unanimous. IEA, IRENA, Global Bioenergy Partnership, and many governments in the world, US, Brazil, et cetera, have very clear roles for biofuels moving forward. And yet this is resisted in some parts of the world. Could you just quickly give your sense on where this resistance comes from, given this broad-based technical support for the need for a niche role in biofuels, and particularly in transport? And we'll go in the same order that we started. So perhaps Freya could jump in if she's not busy answering Olivier.
So I would say that I think there's a fear of the unknown, to be honest. Certainly from our perspective, Lanzatech, we are one of the so-called recycled carbon fuels. We had to create a whole new definition within some of the EU legislation because we didn't fit. And new things tend to scare policymakers, and especially with all the support that was thrown behind first generation fuels and all the unintended consequences. So now anything that comes after has to have the most stringent criteria. And don't get me wrong, absolutely necessary to have sustainability criteria and so on. But it seems the bar has been raised infinitely in some cases for new technologies because of this abject fear that there will be unintended consequences, which, you know, on the other hand, we are hurtling towards, you know, I don't want to be doom mongery, but, you know, let's look at the headlines at the moment. I mean, we're hurtling towards disaster anyway. And so there tends to be this feeling of, you know, perfect is the enemy of the good because of this fear of getting it wrong.
So it's kind of a combination then. So there's sort of a hangover from some of the early experiences, I would say very early experiences with initial biofuels, but then also combined with the fear of new technology. Is that right, Freya?
I think so. I think they very much come together because they're worried that, I think there's a concern that we're not going to have the perfect solution and there'll be some consequences.
Thank you. Marco, to you, given the technical support, why is this not getting more traction in the world?
Well, I maybe looking at, you know, from the European perspective, I guess it's also quite a divided picture because we do see countries where they are promoted very strongly, and we see countries where there's less backing. We see maybe competition at the end of the day for biomaterials. There's really multiple issues, and I must say that I'm quite disappointed that the European Union as a whole is not really playing the game as they should have, which is, you know, technology neutral approach, where it's really the goal that we need to reach, and it's really very much about reducing fossils and not putting different ways of reducing those emissions to play against each other. I think also, you know, the fact that there is de facto proposal for the end of internal combustion engine is not very supportive to the industry. We need investments. We need to use those fuels in different engines. And you know, while I'm certain that, you know, we'll have 100 or 200 million electric vehicles in due time, but we'll still have 100 or 200 non-electric vehicles. And it's really the legacy fleet. It's about circular economy. It's about playing it smart. And I think here there's really a lot of work to be done and a lot of difficult questions for the member states who have to implement these rules to decide in the next coming 1-2 years.
That's great. Let's thank you for that, Marco. Let's put a pin on that idea of the transition of the fleets over time and the shifting transitions as we electrify, where the biomass goes. I'd like to circle back to that for all of us. So Pierluigi, to you, given the sort of technical consensus, I know that it's not 100%, but given that there are a number of people willing to lean in, countries and international organizations, why do you see resistance to implementing policy? You're mute. Oh,
okay, yeah, now it's okay. No, I think that as it was mentioned, it's a combination of factors. So from one side, definitely the complexity that face when you have to change the habits, and you change infrastructures, and you change and you go to really create a different model of businesses. So there are some countries, I have particular experience on regarding Asia, that they are still subsidizing heavily the fossil fuels. So that in that area, it's difficult. You don't have a fair competition, because from one side you have technologies well established since maybe 1 century. In addition to that, they are also subsidized. Now you have to enter with new technology, new investment that by definition, they are at the beginning of their technology development. So in order to have a fair competition, they must rely on policies or subsidies, but the governments sometimes are weak and they are not ready to make a big step, or they find the easy solution to make a very long-term commitment. This morning I heard about 2070. 2070. I can commit almost on everything in 2070. That's the point. So, but this mirrors an objective difficulty. And this is why I think that all actors has to consider that the solution shall be realistic, fair between the emerging and economy and the, let's say, traditional economies. So that's in my opinion, I mean, what is how the situation is at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Johannes, the same question to you.
Yes, a lot of very good answers already given. I can, subscribe to these as well. So then maybe from my perspective, being a bit more self-critical from an industry perspective, how we started off, I think that's where mistakes were made. On the one hand, maybe a too narrow focus on climate mitigation. Yes, that's what we want to achieve, but sustainability is more than that. And that might not have been taken into consideration sufficiently at the time. And then also that we're not maybe able to explain ourselves well enough. And it's interesting to see that our peers in the, what traditionally was the oil industry that we were part of, and we still are, that they came to support biofuels relatively late in the journey. And if you had the funds that were available at that time, you could have run also the right communication campaigns to support biofuels. I think that was something that was somewhat lacking. It's maybe easy to point to money, but it's also about money and turning that into communication, because that's how some of these misperceptions were created that now hamper us in certain parts of the world.
Okay, so we're gonna stay with you, Johannes, and then work backwards. My question now is, California has comparatively high levels of blending, sort of at a first order of approximation attributable to a combination of both federal and state level supports. Johannes, I know that you are active in developing the California renewable diesel market. My question is not so much historical, but more forward looking. Looking at California, perhaps even looking at Brazil with Renova Bio, are there lessons that we can take from the sort of carbon credit markets from the implementation of the low carbon fuel standard in California? Are there lessons that we can take from that to accelerate low carbon fuel adoption, not just in Europe? And then Pierluigi, if you could talk about Africa, Marco and Freya, if you could pick the regions of your interest. Are there lessons that we can take from their experience to drive uptake?
Definitely, definitely, there are lots of lessons to be learned. I would actually see that similar to California, also Sweden has a combination of instruments, so a mandate, but also a tax break. And what California and Sweden have in common is that on the one hand, it's also drove the uptake of the need use of renewable fuels. So that's something that we have been heavily promoting. We have gas stations in both these markets that just force you to have the conversation with the regulator, but also with the end customers, with especially the B2B customers also, that forces you to discuss, to explain and to convince. If you just have a blending mandate only, it disappears potentially in the pool. The customers in my home country, they don't see the biofuel that is being used. There is a small a print on the pump, but nobody looks at that. So it forces you to have that dialogue and to convince the end customers. And so I think that's clearly a learning that neat fuels, they show better that this is a solution, really, rather than it just being a fossil, hidden in the fossil product.
I think your point about the business to business sales is really important, because I think consumers look to businesses, and when they see businesses that they have some level of trust for embracing and showcasing, these new technologies, that gets to some of the challenges raised by the other speakers earlier about the challenge of new technology acceptance. So Pierluigi, same question to you, please.
But definitely let's say the system. Oh, sorry. Okay. The system in place in California is what I consider one of probably the most advanced and better that has been implemented in terms of regulation to support the development of the biofuel industry, because it is based on what is the real achievement that you can get from the specific product and what the contribution that it brings. I think that this shall be a sort of blueprint also for the other regulation, for other policies. You mentioned before to give a special focus on Africa. I give you what is, in my opinion, is that the big opportunities of biofuels for Africa, it's not only in terms of, as Johannes mentioned, in terms of climate, let's say, relief, but in terms of development for the local agricultures and the local economy, because they have the the biofuel industry has, and all the technologies that here in the panel has been mentioned, have the potential to bring economic development to countries where there is a huge opportunity in terms of growing the level of agricultural practices, develop local communities. So has to be seen not only always in terms of let's say, reducing CO2 emissions or reducing dependence from fossils, but also real in terms of opportunities for growth of the countries.
Thank you. Marco, are there lessons from California and the Nordics that you feel are applicable to other geographies?
Well, I think the example from Finland is quite good in the sense that actually our company pretty much invested 200 million into our first biorefinery based on a decision by the Finnish government to double the EU target. So in 2010 they went for 20%, and so we looked at this sounds pretty good, we made a major investment, and we've actually seen probably more investments in Finland than in many other countries, small and big companies. And while that's actually a good example, which I do try to promote, I think the level of complexity, and I think Freya mentioned that as well, it's starting to really hurt the business. What's coming out from, especially in the EU, is definitely way too complex, detailed, and trying to secure every single aspect of the business. And my concern is maybe not for the big companies, but it's especially for the smaller ones, which will struggle to get into the business because you need a legion of sustainability officers, controllers, and database experts, and this and that, and it's not good for the overall industry. So those would be my points.
That's very clear. Thank you. Based on your response, Kyriakos Maniatis pounced, and he said that unfortunately in the last few years you got a very clear signal from the Finnish government, you made an investment, but he says that lately, now that we have been facing policy uncertainty, arguably dating back to the ILUC directives back from 2013. So just staying with you, Marco, what's your prognosis for either dealing with the uncertainty or finding a solution to minimize the uncertainty?
Dealing with the uncertainty, I think large corporations can make these decisions. We see a clear, nevertheless, clear pathways for the harder to decarbonize sectors. We see mandates for new sectors. We see, especially in our case, for advanced biofuels, still a lot of growth opportunities. Overall, we're not pleased to see this nitty-gritty detailed regulation, which will hurt some investments. But overall, I think it's still manageable, but regrettable development. What I'm concerned is that it's actually spilling over to hydrogen and other sectors as well, and we might miss the true opportunities of green growth investments if we are really going to the level of detail as we are heading at the moment.
Interesting. Thank you. Freya had mentioned the perfect being the enemy of the good, but for you, Freya, again, are there policy environments? Maybe the answer is no with your technology, but are there policy environments that are exemplary that could then be shared?
Yeah, and actually, I was nodding along to Marco's response there but actually I'll go one step further to Kyriakos's question. Yeah, there'll be uncertainty and people will go elsewhere and Europe will lose. And, why have we not got more plants in Europe? Why do we have multiple plants operating in China? Because the regulatory environment is very different there. And they're supportive of these waste-based feedstocks, non-food sources of ethanol. They have mandates, for ethanol blending. There are a number of things in place that create that legislative and financial environment conducive to scaling up technology. And I think Pierluigi also mentioned the benefits of an outcomes-based policy framework like the LCFS. That is exemplary. If the EU had continued along an FQD pathway, it would have been, and not an FQD that's tied to RED or RED 2 or RED 3, because at that point, you're negating the point of an outcomes-based policy when you're tied to the inputs that are prescribed. But I'd like to take a sort of slightly different position at this point, because there's one thing that we haven't really talked about. We've talked about the market, but it's also really hard to scale new technology and build first-of-a-kind plants. You need money. And so, and because of this market uncertainty, there's risk, and risk is expensive. Insurance is expensive. And so we need to create or look at sort of policy frameworks or governments that can support or these sort of public-private partnerships working with the finance sector to support that first-of-a-kind deployment so technologies can start building and getting down the cost curve. And I was talking about the LCFS, but actually in the US, there's great systems of support through loan guarantees for these first-of-a-kind plants or taking it, crossing that valley of death. There's a lot of support for R&D, around the world, but then there's this big gap. And how do you get to deploy? Back to Kyriakos' sort of earlier question, I think, about you've got the sort of the impetus to do it. You've got the technology. Why are there no more plants? Because it's really expensive and it's difficult to get, financing for some of these plants. So I think those are some of the lessons that we need to look at. How do you create a framework that makes it conducive for new technologies to build those first plants?
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for those questions. I'd say we have time for one more question, and so I actually want to pick up the phrase that is common in the sector, which is now the idea of competing uses for feedstocks, and clearly at the project level, there's the need to provide supply, but then there's amongst sort of the climate activist community and the academic community, there's frequently discussions around global supply. So I'll try to phrase the question this way. And given that you do this group has different feedstocks, kind of tailor your answers to the specific details of your feedstocks. And we'll go back to Johannes. And so I guess we'll start with fats, oils, and greases. How do you handle the critique that competing uses will render fats, oils, and greases and/or renewable diesel and/or sustainable aviation fuel a very limited solution? Like, do you see potential for increasing feedstock supply? How do you handle that critique, Johannes?
Well, it's I think about what we're doing. It is true that there is a limited pool of the waste and residue raw materials that are currently being used. That's the case. So we're currently talking about 40 million tons globally that also need to be developed, and we're actively developing those. So our answer is that we look into new technologies. It will not be just this technology. It's not going to be the silver bullet here. But we need to maximize also what we get from this technology. Yeah, there's not only the waste and residues, but it was mentioned there's also the non-conventional crops that can be used. But surely, you know, we're looking at municipal solid waste. We're looking at e-fuels. So we also need to go outside, you know, staying within renewable fuels, but outside of biomass. So it's clear that, you know, like battery electric, biofuels are not the one solution for everything.
That's great. Thank you. Pierluigi?
Okay. I talk about cellulosic ethanol basically, and from our technology, for instance, we do not use MSW, municipality solid waste, so we are not competing in that sense, but we use agricultural residual. Our experience so far is that in many countries, there is a huge abundance, a waste of this residual. Not only waste, they are burnt in an uncontrolled way and they create a lot of pollution. So before talking about the competition for the feedstock, I would like to have 100, 200 plants all over the world that are producing cellulosic ethanol with the existing waste from agriculture's activity or forestry activities. Then there is the whole chapter of the, let's say, energy grasses, all these non-food cultivation that can be introduced in in soils that are depleted. So I guess it's I don't see a real big issue on that side of the let's say availability of feedstock.
Great. Marco?
Thanks. Well, one of the issues that we're looking at, of course, as a major forest industry companies, different types of residues of our wood product activities. And I think there are a number of promising technologies. But maybe I'll point out to another development, and it's actually the concept of this cover cropping, sequential cropping. We're just now working since a year already with a consortium of 11 research centers and companies, including FAO as well, on a project called BIKE, Biomass for Low ILUC Bioeconomy in Europe. And that's why, for the reason that we should actually, with the experiences we have from Uruguay, be able to transform these projects also in the Mediterranean region in Europe. Probably not winter cropping in Finland, but really, while the Commission is doing a lot of work on carbon farming and others, I mean, these really go hand in hand, and there's going to be a lot of unused land for such projects in Greece, Italy, France, Spain, and it's one of the priorities for us, actually. Doing it outside of Europe, while it's fine to, it seems, import loads of green hydrogen into the European Union, agriculture sector is a bit more sensitive, as we know, and that's why we try to do it also within the boundaries of the European Union.
Thank you. And finally to Freya, before we end the panel.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we look at the projections of where most of the sort of petroleum sources need, or where the growth is in the next 10 years, chemicals are the obvious area where there's going to be competing use. But from our perspective, we see there's enough carbon to go around, be it from municipal solid waste, carbon emissions, agricultural residues. And again, it feels like a sort of luxury problem to have at this point for us, because we need to keep using all of that carbon, the above ground carbon that's polluting our planet, before we get to that sort of tipping point. But we've already built that into our projections, in the sense that we see transitional technologies. So for example, the steel industry transitioning to new ways of production. So where will our emissions come from? Well, we're looking at the emissions from those lower carbon steel production things. There'll still be a bit of carbon emitted, so we can use that. So we can sort of adapt as feedstocks change. As recycling rates increase, we look at, you know, what are the other feedstocks available? And we see that going hand in hand with the scale up of electrolysis and direct air capture. And you could just bolt those onto an existing facility, you know, safeguarding your investment. And you've got a limitless source of feedstock, i.e. atmospheric CO2. So we see very much a future proofing sort of concept is necessary, and those technologies that are able to pivot as feedstocks transition will succeed.
Wonderful. I really appreciate all the positive perspectives and the concepts that we have sort of untouched levels of supply that could get us very far along. And I'll be at this point, I'll just say that there's a process. There's an international process in the world within the context of the Clean Energy Ministerial. The Biofuture the Biofuture platform, which is led by a number of countries, is very engaged in trying to collect these viewpoints and communicate these to other countries in the world. I'm supporting that effort, and I look forward to recruiting you to contribute to their work stream on biomass quantification and sustainability governance. I'm very grateful for your panel, and I hand over for all of your contributions. If we had an audience, I would lead the applause. But in lieu of that, we will turn over to the gracious host, Michaela Marese.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jerry, for moderating this extremely interesting panel. Thank you for to all the panelists for sharing your experience. A big thank also to Emily, our GBAP co-chair and leader of the activity group, and a big thank also to Connie that coordinated all this event. Well, it's hard to summarize in a couple of points, in a couple of minutes, the huge amount of points that you've raised, that you've discussed, and also questions that were raised during these events. But I would like to share a couple of consideration. We start from an important point that the momentum has changed, is a lot more there, in the sense that bioenergy now is recognized as having a role in terms of net zero emission. We know about the recent IEA, National Energy Agency, Net Zero 2050 report. We've heard about the recent IPCC reports. Many of them relates to bioenergy as an important technology to look at. we've heard, I'm sure you've heard also about the recent G20 summit that took place last weekend. And in this, in particular, this is also another example of how the political momentum is changing positively, let's say. The G20 made a call upon public authorities, private sector, and civil society to work together. And this is, and also recognized in the declaration, sustainable bioenergy amongst various technologies that we should focus on in order to enable a transition towards low emission power systems. This is wording coming from the G20 declaration summit. Well, we know that technology is key. Of course, you've heard. Sustainability is key. And at the same time, funding and policy making and policy stability is key. So it's a matter of joining efforts and raising awareness as much as possible in order to improve the information, which means also reduce misconception and miscommunication sometimes. And this is also one of the main reasons why we have decided to organize this webinar today. And we've decided to focus one of the activity group of GBEP exactly on this in order to further raise awareness and facilitate a sharing of information. And this is also why GBEP will be pleased to continue working with the SAM Biofuture platform and the Biofuture campaign in order to join efforts to avoid misconception. But this doesn't mean that we are not accurate. This means that we go into the details of all possible issues that may raise concern, and we are happy to do so, even with the critical, approach. So it's important to join efforts for this. And well, I thank you all for your participation, and I hope to see you soon at forthcoming GBEP events. So thank you so much for your participation. Thank you. A round of applause, virtual. Thank you very much. See you very soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.